everyone, it's Channin here for Honeybee Stamps. In today's video, we're going to create this winter card. We're going to build a frosty scene and then fill it with some cute Copic colored critters. Let's start with the critters. I have the Winter Woodland Animals here. I'm going to grab several images from this stamp set, place them on over some white cardstock, pick them up with my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp them in intense black ink from Honeybee Stamps. This is an alcohol-friendly ink. You do want to make sure that you let it dry, though, completely before you color. So I've let this dry, and now I'm ready to color. I'm going to start with the bear, and I'm actually only going to use 2 Copic markers to color this whole bear. Starting with my light here, which is E43, I'm going to color all of the bear except for his little snout. I'm going to get a good base coat with this E43, and we'll come back to it to do a little blending later. Now I'm moving on to my dark, which is E57, and I'm employing that feathered stroke where I press down harder when my marker first hits the paper, and then I lift up as I move inward to the bear, and that just makes it a little softer as I lift up, so it's going to make it easier to create this gradation. So now I've moved back to my E43, my light, and I'm blending out that darker brown just to get a nice soft gradation over this bear. And I really like how it turned out. Usually I would use a lot more markers, but this combo worked really well. Now I'm back to the E57, which was my dark, and I'm just adding a little shadow under his scarf, his arm, his little snout, and then I blended it again to soften the edge with E43, my light. Now moving on to a snout, I'm using E30 first as a base, and then my dark will be E31, just adding a little shadow to his ears and snout. Now we're going to move on to that scarf, starting with BG10, and I'm going to color some of the stripes first with that light. We're going to do a 2-color combo. Now my dark for that is BG23, just added a little shadow. Now on to my next combo, which is B93, coloring all the remaining stripes in that scarf, and then finishing up with B97 to add that little shadow. Now we're moving on to the mailbox. Going to use that E30 and E31 to color the post. And then for the mailbox, we're going to start with C1 and color the whole mailbox with that light gray. And then move on to C3 and just add a shadow to the exterior. Now for the interior, I'm going to color first with C3, then C5, and then finish with C7. And then I'll kind of blend it out a little bit. And this will just add that look of depth like this. There's a hole inside that mailbox. Now we're going to move on to a couple reds for the little post part of the mailbox, which was R22 and R47. Now moving on to the rabbit, I'm going to start with C1 and just color all the sides of the rabbit with this light gray, just to give a little shadow and a little depth to him. And then I'm going to grab BG10 and add a little bit of blue here and there, just kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. Then I'll blend it out a little bit with the colorless blender. Now on to the ears, I'm using R20, and then I colored the present with R20, and then R22, R05, and R46. That's kind of my red combo. And then I colored the cheeks of both the bear and the bunny with a little bit more of that R20. And now we're going to move on to the birds. This is our red combo again, starting with R20, then R22, then R05, and then a little bit of R46. A lot of reds, but I just like how dark it gets at the end. I like how it starts really light pink and then gets really dark. I just think it makes a pretty gradation over these birds. Then I colored the little postage with a little bit of my reds. And now I'm going to add BG10, my light blue, to add a little shadow to the envelopes. And then finish up with the beaks with a little bit of yellow. Now we're going to move on to using a white gel pen just to add the highlight. This is totally optional. You don't have to do this. And a lot of people stress about where to put it. I just focus on putting it someplace where it's going to actually show up. So I don't even put any on the rabbit at all, because you need contrast for this white to show up, and my bunny is basically white already. So on the birds, I'm putting it in on the darkest part of the birds. On the bear, I kind of put it on the darkest part of the bear. Tried to put it on some of the dark parts of the mailbox. The only place that would have really showed up was inside the mailbox, but that wouldn't have made any sense. So That's the only time that I kind of followed a rule, but just trying to add it to places where it's actually going to show up. Now we're going to move on to the background. So I had the falling snow background stamp. I'm going to stamp the front in an A2 top folding white card base. I have it here in my MISTI. I used a piece of tape to kind of help me hold it in place while I stamp it. I'm going to ink it up with Honeybee Stamps Clear Embossing and Watermark ink. Stamp the front of this card several times just to make sure I got plenty of that ink on there. And now I'm going to pour over some white embossing powder. And this just creates the prettiest kind of soft snowflake and snow falling background. I really love this background stamp. I've used it a ton already and I just love how pretty it is. After I poured on the powder, I'm going to heat set with my heat tool. And after I've heat set, I am ready to do some simple ink blending to create that really frosty look. Just have 2 inks picked out. We're going to start with Broken China, Distress Oxide, and ink blend kind of the most of this, like the 2/3 of this card front with this blue. And I am creating a little gradation with that Broken China, having it a little bit darker towards the top of the card. Now I moved on to Faded Jeans, just ink blended the last kind of quarter of the card with that, and then I kind of blended it out a little bit with the Broken China. Now we're moving on to Birch A2 cover die, but the base one. This one has more of the birch trees. I just die cut an A2 panel of white cardstock with this beautiful die. I love these trees for a background for your scene building winter cards, or even really any cards. It could easily work for spring or summer. After I die cut it, I just took a 5.5 strip of cardstock and then cut a little kind of snow slope, a little ground. Now I'm going to ink blend the bottom of that with a little bit more of that Broken China just to kind of add a little shadow so it has a little bit of depth. And then I'm going to take BG10, my light blue marker that I use a ton, and then just add a little shadow to the left side of the trees as well as under the branches, just to give another little layer of depth to this scene. And unfortunately, I think in the photos it doesn't come across. You can't really see it very well, but when in person you definitely see those little touches, that little bit of shadow adds just a tiny bit of depth. I've added some liquid glue to our snowdrift. I've just adhered it to the bottom of our birch panel. Now I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to the backside of all of the trees and the frame around the birch panel. And then I'm going to adhere it directly onto the front of our A2 top folding card base. You definitely could have lifted this up with foam adhesive if you wanted to, but I wanted the focus to be on the critters, so I'm going to pop them up instead. I've grabbed a sentiment here from the Pickup Lines stamp set. I'm going to heat emboss, so I added some anti-static powder, inked it up in the Honeybee Clear Embossing and Watermark ink, dipped it into some white embossing powder, and then heat set. Now that I heat set this, I went ahead and used the coordinating dies to die cut the sentiment out and also added some foam adhesive to the back. So now we're basically ready to put this all together. I'm going to first adhere the 2 envelopes together, and then I will adhere them to the bear's paw. Once I have those in place, I've already added foam adhesive to the back side of all my die cuts, so I'm just going to remove the back here and just have fun creating my little scene, kind of filling it all out. And once I finish with that sentiment, all I have left are those little birdies that I'm going to kind of place around to kind of balance everything, and that will finish my card. I'll hold it here to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details. I love these cute little critters and how they add that pop of color to this frosty scene. The background dies and stamp are just perfect. And I think this is a great card for just sending like a winter hello, or even possibly a more like subtle birthday card. Hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.